we're talking about chronic inflammation and what it does to our body, we're specifically talking about cellular inflammation. Now, Time Magazine actually calls it the silent killer. So let's take a look at the cell. The cell is made up of a lipid bilayer or cellular membrane structure. This structure allows for receptor sites to adhere. These receptor sites allow for vitamins, minerals, and even hormones to adhere to it. In a normal functioning healthy cell, food and nutrition come into the cell. Now, when we eat something, food particle, it's broken down into structures for our cell to use. So these vitamins and minerals attach to the receptor and they are drawn into the cell. When this occurs, energy is produced. Energy is produced and then sent outside the cell through hormones, messages, and other antioxidants. Again, this is a normal, functioning, healthy cell. What happens with an abnormal or inflamed cell is two things. These two things, adaptation or death, occur through the receptor dying. So what happens is this receptor is blunted or removed from the cell. Unfortunately, with an inflamed cell, the cell will actually either adapt to the environment or mutate. This is what we call cancer. If it does not adapt or mutate to the environment, the cell will die. This is called apoptosis or cellular membrane death, premature aging. There's three ways cellular inflammation occurs. One is through fats. Two is through sugars. And three, toxins. When you look at fats, either good fats or bad fats, the good fats, for example, let's start there, they will adhere to the cellular membrane or the cell lipid bilayer. So when a good fat adheres to the lipid bilayer, it gives it a nice, strong structure for that receptor to stick to it. So that receptor is nice and healthy and strong to allow food and nutrition to come into the cell to make energy. Now, if we look at a bad fat, for example, a bad fat would be either hydrogenated oils, trans fats. What happens is those fats adhere to the cell membrane. However, they clog the cell wall up. So unfortunately, what happens to this receptor is that it dies as well. So no food can come into the cell or nothing can come out of the cell. Sugars is the second thing that causes cellular inflammation. When you look at sugars, we want to have a 1-to-1 ratio of insulin to glucose in our bodies. Now, unfortunately, the standard American diet doesn't allow for that. That sad American diet is what I like to call it. What happens is when you have over an abundance of sugar or glucose in the body, it actually destroys the insulin receptor. So let's break it down. Let's talk about a hot dog, for example. Now, I'm not saying you eat hot dogs, but for example, we could just break it down easier this way. You take the bun. Now, the bun, for example, is made out of white flour or wheat flour, whatever it is. Most 99% of the time, 100% of the time, it is an enriched flour. Now, that sounds awfully good for you. However, enriched does not mean that it's packed full of vitamins and minerals for your body to use. It means that it is bleached It is chemically stripped of all its nutrients so that it can stabilize on the shelf. Now, after it's stripped of all its nutrition and taste, because our bodies are so desensitized to sugar, we have to add sugar back into the bun. So that bun has now added sugar. Now take the hot dog, for example. That is a piece of meat that, again, chemically has been stripped of all its good, healthy nutrition from it, processed, bleached, antibiotics added. And after all that process is done, we need to add, again, sugar back into it because we do not want to taste a bleached hot dog, right? So now that bun and that hot dog, that very thing that we're about to consume for dinner, we know that it's not a dessert, is packed full of sugar. Now, of course, we have to add something on top of it that is also full of sugar, which is ketchup. Ketchup, again, our taste buds are very desensitized to the normal tomato-based flavor, so ketchup is added, or sugar is added to our ketchup. So obviously we're not eating dessert, like I said. However, this hot dog is packed full of sugar. So again, this is how type 2 diabetes occurs. When our bodies have an overabundance of glucose in the body and we don't have enough insulin receptors. It's not that we don't have the insulin receptors, it's the fact that our insulin receptors are being overworked, and therefore those receptors die. Sugar, we also call an anti-nutrient. It will fight for the receptors for your vitamins and minerals. So that the very nutrition that our body needs is actually also being stripped from the body from just eating sugar. Cancer is also the #1 cause, or sugar is also the #1 feed for cancer. So our bodies are literally dying just from sugar. Toxins is the third item that causes cellular inflammation. When we look at toxins, we can look at toxins from our food and toxins from our environment. For example, toxins from our food, we can look at food preservatives. MSG, for example. We call these excitotoxins. These excitotoxins will go to the receptor site and they will do exactly what it's called, excite the receptor. So when that receptor is excited to the point where it just can't be excited anymore, it will then die off. Again, another cause of cellular inflammation and cell death. So what happens is we call this cell oxidized. When our cell is oxidized, we need an antioxidant. Well, guess what? Our bodies produce the best antioxidant on the planet. And we're not talking about blueberries here, guys, or that acai berry. We're talking about glutathione. Glutathione is the most powerful antioxidant in your body. However, it is extremely expensive, and it will take 3 ATP or 3 energy molecules to be made in your body. Now, what happens is when energy or when food isn't getting into the cell to make that energy, what happens is your body is not producing the glutathione that it needs. And this is where we see those new millennium diseases occur: hypertension, diabetes, heart disease.